I finally have you back. Now no one will take you away from me ever again. Hey everyone, I thought I'd take a break from all the and instead review something a little more family friendly on my channel. That being said, I don't actually want YouTube to label this video as being for children, so fuck balls, that should do it. So I recently played the Sonic fan game Sonic Robo Blast 2, and I was so impressed with the project that I just had to make a review for it. I know this might sound like hyperbole, but Sonic Robo Blast 2 might genuinely be the greatest 3D Sonic game ever made, at least in my admittedly worthless opinion. At the very least, it's easily the greatest fan game I've ever played, and is a must play for anyone even remotely interested in the blue blur. Sonic Robo Blast 2 was developed by a small group of people known as Sonic Team Junior, which is just the most adorable fucking name for a development studio ever. Might also lead to them getting sued in the future, but let's not focus on that right now. Sonic Team Junior began development of Sonic Robo Blast 2 all the way back in 1998, which basically means the game has been in active development for nearly a quarter of a century. During the early stages of development, however, Sonic Robo Blast 2 was not even going to be a 3D game. Instead, it was going to be whatever the fuck this is. I mean, it's fine, I guess, even if visually it looks like some fan art I drew over a decade ago. At age 22.
Don't look at me! Don't look at me!
But over time, Sonic Team Junior's ambitions for the title grew substantially in size. Eventually, the team decided to use a modified version of the Doom engine, which would allow them to essentially turn Sonic Robo Blast 2 from a 2D game into a 3D game. Watching the development history of this game is fascinating, as you could really see the project morph into something truly special as the years passed by. The last major release of Sonic Robo Blast 2 dropped back in 2019, and that is the version I'll be looking at today. Sonic Robo Blast 2 begins with a very long, very boring cutscene, where Dr. Eggman basically decides to be a cunt again, and Sonic decides he needs to stop him. This cutscene drags on for nearly 5 minutes, and if I'm being honest, I completely zoned out around the 2-minute mark. I don't play Sonic games for the story, which is good, because Sonic Robo Blast 2 barely has one worth caring about. Once the opening cutscene ends, you are brought to the main menu, and I was completely blown away with how feature-packed this game really is. There is so much shit to tinker around with, from the visuals to the controls, and even a sound test. There is a separate menu for the game's secret levels and challenge stages. For a free fan game, the sheer amount of settings and extras you can mess around with is truly staggering. Once you start a new game, you are brought to a character select screen, where you can choose from a pretty sizable collection of characters. You can also unlock further characters like Amy Rose and Fang by playing through the campaign. As you might imagine, every character has a different set of skills and abilities that will allow you to experience the game in vastly different ways. For example, Knuckles can glide through the air and clamber up walls. He is basically the game's easy mode. While on the other end of the spectrum, Fang's moveset is a bit more difficult to get the hang of, but he is super fun to mess around with once you get to grips with his pogo ability. If you want my advice, however, I recommend choosing Sonic and Tails if it's your first time playing the game. Sonic Robo Blast 2 is a surprisingly difficult game, and having Tails by your side will allow you to essentially bypass many of the game's most challenging moments. Anyways, once you select your character, you are immediately greeted with this visually stunning vista. I can't understate how fucking awestruck I was upon starting this game for the first time. Need I remind you that this is a fan game that you can download and play right now for free. It shouldn't look this good. I mean, sure, it's running off what is essentially a modified version of the Doom engine, which means that your player character and most in-game assets are simple 2D sprites instead of 3D models. But what can I say? When the sprite work is this good, it's kinda difficult to find much to complain about. Initially, you might find Sonic kinda difficult to control, especially if you are playing with a keyboard. But with a little practice, you'll be flying around the levels at crazy speeds in no time. I think what I like most about Sonic Robo Blast 2 is that even though it's a 3D game, it shares more in common with the 2D Sonic games rather than the 3D ones. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love many of the 3D Sonic games, and I still think that the 360 and PS3 version of Sonic Unleashed is one of the most criminally underrated games of all time. But I also found many of the 3D Sonic entries to have incredibly linear level design that very rarely allowed you to explore off the beaten path. That simply isn't the case with Sonic Robo Blast 2. Practically every level is gigantic, with tons of secrets to find and alternate paths to explore. I'm not lying when I say that you could easily spend an hour exploring many of these levels and still not find everything there is to see. I mean, if you want, you can simply make a beeline for the finish line. Holy shit. You can run to the end of a level as quickly as possible, and there is a lot of fun to be found in doing that. But by taking your time and exploring the various environments, you can find many secret areas that house extra lives, gold coins that allow you to enter a special stage where you can try to obtain a Chaos Emerald, and emblems that unlock a wealth of bonus content, like artwork and extra levels. Again, it's a staggering amount of content that puts most official Sonic games to shame. Green Flower Zone is the first stage in Sonic Robo Blast 2, and as you might expect, it's a gentle introduction to the game that allows the player to get used to the controls and gameplay mechanics. That being said, there are a ridiculous amount of enemies littered everywhere throughout this zone. There doesn't seem to be any logic to where enemies are placed either. The developers just decided to place them everywhere and anywhere, which can be quite frustrating. What's strange is that this is the only zone where enemies are so plentiful. The later zones have fewer enemies, but they are placed in areas where they can be a more effective threat to the player. Thankfully, avoiding enemies is usually quite simple, since most levels consist of wide open spaces where you aren't in much danger of getting attacked. As you might expect, if you do get hit, your character will drop all of their rings, and you'll have a very short amount of time to pick back up as many as you can. If you have a shield equipped when you get hit, you will not lose any rings, but your shield will disappear. Speaking of the shields, there's a wide variety of them in Sonic Robo Blast 2, and they are certainly interesting. There's the regular shield that doesn't have any special abilities, the magnet shield that will draw in any nearby rings, the tornado shield that will allow you to essentially double jump, which is kinda pointless if you have Tails with you, a flame shield that does whatever the fuck that was, and a nuclear shield that will destroy any nearby enemies. The only problem is that the range on this attack is worthless, which makes the shield basically fucking pointless.
You've also got one of our mystery counters side. A course of indoor ski lessons courtesy of Skiplex.
Well, as you might imagine, combat can kinda be awkward at times with how fast the game can be. There is a Sonic Adventure style lock-on system that can make attacking enemies easier, but it doesn't always work as well as you'd expect. You are usually far better off rolling into enemies or just avoiding them altogether. The third act of every zone is usually where the game pits you against one of Sonic Robo Blast 2's many bosses. These fights are great fun for the most part, The first few are very reminiscent of early boss fights from the Mega Drive Sonic games, but some of the later bosses get crazy inventive. I mean, check out this crazy contraption. If Eggman had just resisted the urge to place these massive coloured buttons around the arena, Sonic might have finally met his match. Silly As I mentioned earlier, by carefully exploring every level, you can find these gold coins that will allow you to enter a special stage once you reach the end of the current level. These special stages are, no lie, the most fun I've ever had with a special stage in the entire Sonic series, which should come as no surprise since the special stages are heavily inspired by Nights into Dreams, which is one of my favourite Sega Saturn games. Well, I say heavily inspired, but really they just totally fucking ripped off Nights into Dreams. But that is no bad thing, since Nights' gameplay mechanics lend themselves perfectly to quick, intense bursts of gameplay, which is what Sonic's special stages have always emphasized in the past. In these special stages, you need to collect a certain amount of orbs in a very strict amount of time. Once you have collected enough orbs, you have to race to the finish line in order to collect the Chaos Emerald before you run out of time. It's great fun, and you can even replay these levels from the main menu to aim for a higher score or better ranking. These special stages start off incredibly easy, but the last few are a right pain in the ass to complete. The last special stage in particular took me nearly a dozen attempts to complete. As you might expect, once you have collected all 7 Chaos Emeralds, you can transform into Super Sonic, and he is great fun to fuck around with. The second zone you'll visit is called Techno Hill Zone. The first act of this zone is disappointingly similar to Green Flower Zone in terms of its level design. But thankfully, once you reach the second act, things get more interesting. The stage is clearly inspired by Chemical Plant Zone, with its city background, mechanical traps, and most importantly, the pink water. The water works a little differently in Sonic Robo Blast 2, however. Whenever you are underwater, you will automatically rise to the surface. I don't understand how this makes any sense, but whatever. Speaking of water, the third area in the game is called Deep Sea Zone, and as you might expect, it's the game's water stage. Assuming you are able to stay above water, however, this is actually one of my favourite zones in the game. The level design starts getting a lot more challenging from here on out, and there are some truly fiendish platforming sections to boot. I also love how much freedom you are given to explore off the beaten path in this zone. In fact, some areas in this zone are so massive that it can be quite easy to get lost if you aren't careful. I also of course have to give a quick shout out to this fun water slide section, which is clearly a callback to Sonic Adventure. Of course, if you do happen to fall underwater at any point, you will have a limited amount of time to find a source of air before you drown. Thankfully, there are plenty of air bubbles to be found underwater in these stages, but it is still the most anxiety-inducing feeling in the world when the timer appears and that music starts. Especially when Tails is also trying to fuck you over and take the air for himself. Phew, that was close, am I right? Tails, don't worry, you can have the next air bubble we find. Tails? Tails? The next zone, however, is my favourite in the entire game. Castle Eggman has some of the most genius level design I have ever seen in any Sonic game. The first act places you outside the castle itself. I just love the atmosphere of this area. The rain and thunder, the massive castle looming in the background. It's great stuff. There are also some really fun gimmicks introduced in this stage, like these launchers that send you absolutely flying. I can't adequately convey how much fun it is to be sent soaring past half the level, only to land perfectly on a precarious ledge. It is also possible to skip large parts of the level by using Sonic's spin dash intelligently. However, my favourite part of the stage has to be at the very end, when the whole area around you begins collapsing, and you need to make a mad dash for the castle gates before you fall to your death. A great end to a great stage. The next stage is a different beast altogether, however. Castle Eggman Act 2 takes place within the castle itself, and to call this place massive would be a severe understatement. I have to imagine that it took the developers months, if not years, to develop this one stage alone. The castle is fantastically detailed, with beautiful architecture everywhere you look. There are so many different paths you can take through the castle that it borders on absurdity. I mean, just take a look at this courtyard section. You are given several different doors to pass through, and each will bring you to an entirely different area of the castle. At one point I messed up and fell from this ledge to the area below. However, instead of dying, my fuck up was instead rewarded with a massive new area to explore that I had never even seen before. This stage also has some of my favourite platforming sections of the entire game. They have just the right amount of challenge to keep you on your toes. I'm glad that the developers of Sonic Robo Blast 2 remembered that platforming was always a core tenet of the early Sonic games. Yes, they were also about speed and getting through a level as quickly as possible, but the speed was always meant to be a reward for good platforming. Many later Sonic games would forget this, and would allow you to just boost through most stages without a care in the world. Sonic Robo Blast 2 has plenty of sections where you are able to speed through a level without much in the way of challenge. But it also has plenty of sections where you need to slow down and put your platforming skills to the test, which is very refreshing to see in a 3D Sonic game for once. I don't want to completely spoil the remaining 3 zones in the game, except to say that this section can get fucked, completely and utterly fucked. Oh, also, this level where you have to race against Metal Sonic is a bit too challenging for its own good. You need to practically run the course flawlessly if you want to win, which will almost definitely result in most players either losing the race or falling to their deaths dozens of times. Also, this section can get fucked. Of course, once you finish the story mode, there is plenty of extra content to dig into. The bonus unlockable stages are great fun and very challenging. You can also unlock even more content by completing these stages. For example, by completing Frozen Hillside Zone, you will unlock Amy Rose as a playable character.
But if someone tries to touch you in a place or in a way that makes you feel uncomfortable, that's no good.
So overall, I have very few issues with Sonic Robo Blast 2. I mean, sure, it can be awkward to control at times, and an unfortunate side effect of the game running on the Doom engine is that there is no way to rotate the camera up or down, which can lead to some very unfair deaths at times. But these small nitpicks are nothing compared to everything Sonic Robo Blast 2 gets right. The game is simply gorgeous, to the point where I'm still shocked that this is a fan game made primarily by one person. The level design is phenomenal and encourages repeat playthroughs with how many paths there are to take through a stage. The soundtrack, oh my god, the soundtrack. Look, I'd happily spend all day gushing about this game's soundtrack, but unfortunately I don't want to talk anymore. You will just have to take my word for it that the soundtrack is incredible, and several tracks will be stuck in your head for weeks after you have completed the game. This is simply my favourite fan game of all time, and might even be my favourite Sonic game, period. The fact that this experience is free is quite simply mind-blowing, and every Sonic fan out there needs to download it as soon as possible.